This is Stories from the States. I'm Chris Fitzsimon. Here at States Newsroom, we know there's a lot going on around the country in every state capital, so thanks for being here. Today we're talking about the death penalty. Over the last few decades, the number of executions per year in the United States has been on the decline, but 27 states still have capital punishment, and many of them are imposing it more often. For decades, one Indiana woman has been speaking out against the practice, and her experience is unique. Her parents and aunt were killed by her uncle, who was sentenced to death.
I didn't get any type of closure from Eric's execution. It didn't bring me any type of relief.
Alabama made headlines in 2024 as the first jurisdiction in the world to use nitrogen gas to execute an inmate on death row. Last year, the state executed 5 people and had scheduled one in 2026. A 75-year-old man in a wheelchair convicted of felony capital murder even though he didn't pull the trigger. His fate, though, quickly changed, and coming up in a moment, we'll hear from an Alabama Reflector reporter who broke the news. Alabama was second in the nation for the number of executions held in 2025 and had scheduled its first one of this year for March 12th. The state was scheduled to execute Charles Sonny Burton. Burton was convicted of something called felony murder. That is, he was present at a 1991 robbery in Talladega where a man was killed, but Burton himself didn't pull the trigger. His fate quickly changed this week, however, when Alabama Governor Ivey commuted Burton's sentence. Here to help us figure out what's going on in the case is Ralph Chapoco. He's a senior reporter at the Alabama Reflector, which is an outlet with States Newsroom. Ralph, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we thought we might be having a different conversation, and things really took a turn. So bring us up to date. What happened this week in the case of Charles Sonny Burton?
Yeah, so we were all set to carry out the execution of Charles Sonny Burton, and the newsroom was making preparations for me to go down to Atmore, Alabama, where the execution would take place. That's Holman Correctional Facility, where death row is. But as of Tuesday, we got a news release from the governor's office saying that she has decided to commute and grant clemency, sparing the life of Charles Sonny Burton from being executed. So all plans to have the execution get carried out have been eliminated and halted, and he will live out his life, the rest of his life, in the custody of the Alabama Department of Correction.
And was this a surprise? The governor isn't normally a governor who we expect to commute death sentences.
In my tenure here, there's been only one other time when she's actually granted clemency and commuted a death sentence. So this is rare, right? Like, this is rare, at least in my time that I've been here. This has been only the second time. And this doesn't usually happen. So this is a rare and kind of one-off event.
And I think, did she not say in the press release, or maybe I've seen there've been a lot of coverage of it, and you guys have, of course, been doing a great job, that she was concerned about the disparate sentences between Charles Sonny Burton, and the person who actually committed the murder?
That's actually exactly what she said. So in the news release that she gave out, she rehashed a lot of the details in the case and in the incident. But one of the key critical lines is there's disparate, meting out of justice, where the shooter, his name is Derek DeBruce, had his sentence reduced in the appeals process to life without parole. And he was the one responsible for shooting and killing Doug Battle, who was the customer that actually walked into that AutoZone store that he shot. And yet Sonny Burton, along with other accomplices in that incident, were already outside of the store, about ready to leave, and they had no idea until afterward that Derek DeBruce had actually shot and killed Doug Battle. That was the thrust of kind of her justification, according to the news release.
And this is really, this is sort of the definition of felony murder. Can you explain that for folks who are confused about how could someone get sentenced to death who didn't commit a murder?
So in felony murder, a person who is part or an accomplice to a crime can be culpable for any incident or an event that happens so Charles Sonny Burton, in the eyes of the law, knew that there was a possibility that someone could get killed because he was part of a group that was attempting to rob the AutoZone store. And on top of that, there were weapons. So he should have known, at least according to law, that there's a possibility that someone could get killed and he could be held responsible for anything that happened during the course of that incident.
And it's fairly rare, isn't it, that someone would be sentenced to death in this sort of instance, that they weren't actually the person who pulled the trigger?
So the Death Penalty Information Center actually tracks how many times this has happened over the past few decades. Their data that I saw, it was about a couple dozen times that this incident has happened where people have been involved in the underlying crime, and even to the point where it could have been where someone was killed, but they didn't actually were not directly involved and didn't directly pull the trigger. In fact, Alabama has had a case for this with Nathaniel Woods, I believe, probably about more than a decade ago. That was the last time. So yeah, it does happen. It's more rare than not, but it actually does happen, and there have been cases and instances of it happening.
What was the reaction in Alabama? I mentioned in the intro that it's a case that has had a lot of executions in the last couple years. Could you get a sense of what the reaction was there among sort of policymakers and other folks to the governor's decision to commute the sentence?
So there was actually a Democratic lawmaker who praised the decision. His name is Napoleon Bracey. He's a member of the Alabama House of Representatives who actually mentioned the incident on the floor during debate and discussion. And so he actually praised the decision. And as well as Doug Jones, he's a candidate for governor, a Democratic candidate for governor. He actually praised the decision. Maybe praise is too strong a word, but he agreed. He didn't oppose the decision for clemency. And, death penalty group who opposed the death penalty definitely praised the decision. One person who was not happy was actually the Alabama Attorney General, who said he was disappointed by the decision that Governor Ivey made.
Is it your sense that this might start another discussion about just the felony murder rule in general? I mean, that seems to be what the governor pinpointed, that he he got disparate treatment, but also he was set to be executed for a murder that he didn't actually commit. I wonder if this will start any sort of discussion about the felony murder rule.
That's unclear right now. I mean, at the end of the day, this state is a state that actually really does believe in the death penalty. They have recently enacted legislation to expand the conditions or the eligibility for imposing the death penalty in Alabama. So it remains to be seen whether or not felony murder or this case will somehow reignite a debate or a discussion on whether or not this is just and fair.
And it's worth noting for folks who might not be familiar, the state of Alabama was the first state to use nitrogen gas as a method of execution back in 2024. Ralph, you've covered a number of executions, and you witnessed the first execution by nitrogen gas. What's it like to cover this issue in general? I mean, people sort of talk about life and death, decisions and legislation and all this, but this is the ultimate sort of life and death decision.
It's a unique experience. I will say that. This is my first time ever really covering the death penalty ever in my career. And what I'm noticing is that's just how somber the whole issue is. No one is celebrating, and everything is very mechanical and very systematic and very methodological. It's almost as if everyone's playing a role in this entire process. And once they fill that role, it's over and done with. So it's almost as if people are just carrying out their duties and responsibilities, and we're no different. We're all having to be there. We're all having to witness it. Once it's done, we move on.
Was that the case with the execution that you witnessed?
That was my first ever execution I witnessed, and it was the very first time that nitrogen gas was ever used on another individual to essentially carry out the execution. I actually struggled with it. It got very real for me when I was in the van. And we were getting driven to the chamber, and in my mind, I realized I am going to watch someone die tonight. I was preparing for it. I was trying my best to come to grips with the situation, but even after it happened, I struggled a while with coming to grips with what I saw.
Well, Ralph, thank you so much for covering this. It's such an important story, and thanks for bringing us up to date in this case. Thank you very much. According to a report from the Death Penalty Information Center, there were 48 executions in the nation in 2025. That was almost double the amount in 2024, and they were concentrated in a handful of conservative states. The group also notes that states that impose capital punishment are intensifying efforts to expand its use, even as public support continues to decline. Like in Arizona, Republican lawmakers there want to bring back death by firing squad as an option for people sentenced to the death penalty. In Utah, there's a bill being proposed by the GOP to speed up the timeline on death penalty cases moving forward, while in Indiana, some Republican state lawmakers want to add the firing squad as a method of execution. Their efforts fell short and it did not pass. For Indiana resident Kim Dillman, that's good news. She's opposed to the death penalty.
Why are we darkening our horizon? Why are we not bringing it to light? Why are we not encouraging loving each other? Why are we not encouraging forgiving each other?
Coming up, we'll chat with her.
At a time when so many communities are losing their local news outlets, State's Newsroom is filling a gap. We are now the nation's largest state-focused nonprofit news organization, with reporters based in every state capital and Washington, D.C. But we can't do it without your support. Your contributions allow us to produce award-winning journalism and deliver it to you for free, no pop-ups, no paywalls. This is a crucial time to support local journalism, and every bit helps. To give, go to statesnewsroom.com/donate.
The death penalty, of course, directly hurts the person being executed, but it often leaves a scar for victims. For Kim Dillman, it's something she will always remember. In Evansville, Indiana in 1994, her uncle, Eric Wrinkles, shot and killed her parents, Tony and Natalie, and her Aunt Debbie. Kim, along with her brother and cousins, were inside the house when it happened. Wrinkles was convicted and sentenced to death for the murders. He was executed by lethal injection on December 11, 2009. Since the conviction and execution, Kim has been vocally against the death penalty and has been involved with the Indiana Abolition Coalition to end the practice. Kim, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Well, no one can imagine what you actually have been through and how brave you are to be speaking out on whatever side, just to go through something. And I wondered if you could just tell us briefly about your journey. How did you come to be part of this movement?
Well, funny enough, my grandmother, my mom's mom, Natalie's mom, raised me and my brother to, I wouldn't say to not just hate, but to forgive others. I mean, we are very devout Catholics, and in the Lord's Prayer, we forgive others' trespasses, and we really want to live out that from the Lord's Prayer, and this is part of that, part of my faith.
Did this journey take a while? Obviously, again, no one, not very many people in the world could understand what had happened to you and your family. So I wondered if this was a process.
Yes and no, and it kind of comes in waves sometimes because grief very much comes in waves. There are days that are easy to be forgiving, and there's days that it's really hard to bear that. But I also know that the flip side of that is if I was going to carry that with me, that hatred with me forever, that's like, and it's kind of a stupid analogy, but it's like drinking a poison and waiting for the other person to die. And I've seen so much in my close relatives that did carry that hatred for Eric. And it kind of poisoned their life. And I have no interest in poisoning my life with that hatred.
Well, what were you thinking when the person who killed your family was executed? What was going through your mind at that point? And how do you feel now looking back on that? That's been a while ago now.
Well, at first I was really worried that I myself was just going to be kind of set back in my healing process. And it was, years and years and years after the fact of losing my parents. But there was also I was a parent then, and I had to play a different role. I couldn't just be in my healing process. I had to be mom to my children. And part of that fear was also the fear of maybe my own mortality, and knowing that one day my children are going to be on this earth without me, and that's a little scary. And now looking back at it, I'm a little angry with the system for allowing another human life to be taken.
Yeah. I wonder what it's like for you and how you became involved in the Indiana Abolition Coalition. How did you turn that religious belief and these feelings into action to maybe affect the system for other people?
Well, when I was about 20 years old, I actually was at a youth retreat for our diocese, and one of the coordinators asked me to get up and tell my story. And I stood in front of about 500 adolescents from ages about 12 to 17 and spoke in front of them. And it was in that moment I realized that my voice could change this. And it may just be a drop in a bucket, but if it's me saying stop, I can also build people power to behind me to make it stop.
How old were you when your family was taken?
I was 9 years old. I was 3 months from turning 10.
Wow. And what was the reaction when you were talking? And that's an amazing. Just anybody talking in a group of 500 people is intimidating. And I wonder what was the reaction in that group? And maybe a larger question: what's the reaction when you speak publicly now about your experience and your views?
Well, yeah, it was a little intimidating, but and not to use this quote lightly, but I feel like there was probably not a dry eye in the house, quote unquote. I think it was eye-opening for a lot of them just because we were so close in age at that time, and for me to come out on the other side of that situation as someone who is forgiving and loving, opposed to someone who is bitter and hateful. I think that spoke to that group a lot. And now whenever I speak out about there's very much a divide a lot of the times. Some people think I'm a little crazy for even considering forgiveness, but that's my choice, and that's my experience.
I know you have done this a lot in your work with the Abolition Coalition. What do you say to policymakers or people who still believe the death penalty is the appropriate punishment? How do you beyond your story? How do you explain to them why they should change that?
Well, and I'm going to throw a quote at you from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. And to me, why are we darkening our horizon? Why are we not bringing it to light? Why are we not encouraging loving each other? Why are we not encouraging forgiving each other? And honestly, the biggest healing part of my journey was finally letting go of what I thought was my responsibility to be upset about it. I can be upset and be hurt while also celebrating my parents. I spoke to a gentleman last weekend actually who told me about the first time my parents actually met. He was there, and that's something I would never ever get to know because my parents can't tell me. I wasn't old enough for them to tell me that story whenever they passed. So while that it kind of brought me to tears. I cried in the middle of Walmart, but I was able to see that then as something I can rejoice in. I still have that part of them, and it lightened my heart. And my story is not about Eric. My story didn't end when Eric took my parents' life. And I would have preferred, honestly, to be able to forget about him and not be reminded years down the road whenever they decided to execute him. Or every time something came up in the news about it, I was reminded about it because he was sitting on death row and it's sensationalized through the news, and constantly reminded about that one point in my life. Instead of being able to celebrate my parents, it was constantly brought back to the night they died.
What do policymakers and other folks say when you tell your story? I mean, what's a reaction? I guess it's mixed.
It's mixed. My grandma actually tells a story about whenever she had a conversation with the prosecutor here in Vanderbilt County, talking about how she was against the death penalty, and he returned that on her and said, "Well, should we have forgiven Hitler for murdering all the Jews?" And she says, "This isn't that. This is different." And she's like, "And my situation is not that situation." And she's like, "My situation is my daughter died and I'm choosing to forgive her murderer." She's like, "That's all this is." She's like, "This is not that."
Your grandmother sounds like she's something.
She is something. She's a wonderful something, and she is something out of this world, and I'm really proud to be able to call her mine.
What do you make of the public discussion now of the death penalty? You know, at least nationally, and I think this is probably true of Indiana, it felt like there was a lull in support. There weren't as many executions. Now there are states that have increased their executions. A bill in the Indiana legislature is trying to expand how we execute people. What do you think accounts for it feels like a little bit of renewed support, at least in the elected officials world for capital punishment?
I think there at a state and national level, there has been an acceptance of an eye for an eye mentality, and the thought process of vengeance is prevalent, unfortunately. Whenever the whenever Eric was executed, there was a gap of almost 12, 14, something like that, years between executions in the state of Indiana for state executions. And I was really honestly relieved to hear that finally Indiana was not executing people. Well, I started doing a little digging whenever the next execution came up and found out that it was only due to the lack of the chemicals that they use to execute people. And was like, "Oh, okay, so it's only about money." And that's what it comes down to. It's about money.
And what would you want most, not so much policymakers, what would you want people who are listening to this, who are trying to understand it all and aren't elected official and don't spend time studying it? What do you want people to know about this whole issue and your story?
Honestly, I didn't get any type of closure from Eric's execution. It didn't bring me any type of relief. It only hurt me because I know that he is somebody's son, he is somebody's brother, he is somebody's uncle, he is somebody's father. And we took that person away from all of those people. And now those people are hurting.
I think an appropriate place to end it. Thank you so much for not only being with us, but your courage and bravery going through all this. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Kim mentioned that she's concerned about the amount of money the state is spending to perform these executions. And according to reporting from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle, the state paid $100,000 for execution drugs used in October 2025. In total, the state has spent at least $1.275 million on pentobarbital. 5 men currently remain on Indiana's death row at the state prison in Michigan City, though one has been deemed incompetent to be executed and none are currently scheduled. For the latest reporting on what's going on with the death penalty in your state, you can always go to newsfromthestates.com. Coming up shortly, Evening Wrap newsletter writer Danielle Gaines will join us with the top stories she's looking out for, and with one last thing.
Hi, it's Nell Dunlap, Product and Engineering Director at States Newsroom. At States Newsroom, we believe journalism should be fair, fearless, and free. With reporters working on the ground in all 50 states and Washington, D.C., we provide nonpartisan coverage of the state issues that matter most to you. You can subscribe to our work by going to statesnewsroom.com/subscribe.
And now the favorite part of the week on Stories from the States, our check-in with Evening Wrap newsletter writer Danielle Gaines. Danielle, how are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Quite a week it was. I guess we can say that every week these days. What was something that caught your eye?
Yeah, I agree. Well, I wanted to go a little bit of a different direction. And so I've seen a few stories cropping up, and that is a pun intended, about strains on farmers and farmland. So we have a story out of North Carolina, which, as you know, the state has not passed a permanent budget in more than 2 years. And among the growing list of casualties as a result of that impasse is farmland. So the state's ag commissioner is asking lawmakers to act quickly on farmland preservation funding, which is money that allows the state to pay farmers for easements to protect their land from development. And it's becoming an imperative. So according to a recent report from the American Farmland Trust, North Carolina ranks second in the nation, just behind Texas, for projected farmland loss. And the state estimates that they're losing about 100,000 acres a year.
Wow. It is interesting. The only state in the country that hasn't passed a budget, and the legislature is controlled by Republicans. I mean, there's not a big fight in the legislature partisan-wise. It's very unusual.
Yeah, and there are like so many different things colliding to create this phenomenon with farmland. So, things that we've talked about on the podcast before, like rural landscapes are being gobbled up by data centers and biotech projects. There are financial strains. The cost of fuel is up. We're at war. The cost of fertilizer is up. There are trade conflicts. And so all of these things are kind of coming together, and without intervention, a lot of people in North Carolina are really worried about the future of the farm industry.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, what about something coming up?
Something that I'm watching, we had a great story this week. There's a lot of ongoing debate throughout the country right now about legislation that would expand the rights of doctors, nurses, hospitals, and sometimes even insurance companies to refuse to provide or pay for care. So we know about medical conscience bills, but now they are being dramatically expanded in ways that could limit access to contraception, fertility services, medical marijuana. Vaccines is a big issue where this is coming up now. And Stateline reported that there are at least 8 states considering these laws this year. Several states have passed expanded laws in recent years.
Wow, it may change how people choose their doctor. You'll have to ask a lot of new questions.
Yeah, it may change how people choose their doctors. It may change where doctors are choosing to practice. It could have kind of a profound effect. And a lot of the bills require, some sort of posting about if you're not going to provide some service that you need to post about it. But Stateline had one example in their story about a woman who was at a hospital hooked up to an IV for a sterilization surgery when the hospital's medical ethics board intervened and said that they had a duty to protect her, quote, sacred fertility, and that the surgery wouldn't be moving forward.
Wow.
So it's a new frontier there as well.
Unbelievable. Okay, what about one last thing?
Okay, I picked something fun for this.
Well, I need something fun, so that's one thing, but go ahead.
And I want your opinion. Would you rather ride a train that is named Coco or Fred?
Coco.
Coco, me too. Except for I feel like Fred is like an old school municipal mass transit name.
Yeah.
But this is all because Colorado is having a public vote right now, and it is ongoing. So if you want to have a role in that, you can through March 23rd. This is for a planned intercity rail service in that state. And so they have a series of names that you can choose from. So the Colorado Connector, Coco, the Colorado Ranger, which is fun, Fred, which is just very straightforward, the Front Range Express Destinations train. And Range Link. The only thing I was disappointed about in this story, aside from learning a lot about Colorado train tracks, is that you have to pick between the 4. So there will not be a situation where it can be, choo-choo McChoo-choo face or anything fun like that.
Right. Well, that's fascinating. All right, go Coco.
Exactly.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the States. I'm Chris Fitzsimon. Mallory Chang produced and edited the podcast. David Singer produced our theme music. If you liked what you've heard today, please leave a rating and review. It means a lot to hear what you think about what we're doing here. To stay up to date on the latest episodes, subscribe now to Stories from the States, a podcast from States Newsroom. Available wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll talk to you soon.